Welcome to Afro-Korean romance, where you'll find passion, obsession, and captivating Afro-Korean love stories. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share for more. She was dancing alone in the rain at midnight in Seoul when a stranger in a black coat stepped out of a bulletproof car and joined her. That was how it started. That was how everything ended. Helen Osei did not set out that Tuesday night with any intention beyond survival. The kind of survival that does not involve knives or cliffs, but the quieter, more vicious kind. The kind where you're 24 years old, 11 months into a fashion internship that was supposed to change your life, and you're standing in a cramped studio apartment in Mapogu with an eviction notice on your door, a phone full of unanswered messages from your mother in Lagos, and a dress you designed yourself that the senior creative director called aggressively ethnic in front of the entire floor. That was what broke her that evening. Not the rent, not the loneliness, not even the way her Korean colleagues went quiet whenever she walked into a room. The particular silence of people deciding how much space to give you. It was that phrase, aggressively ethnic, spoken with a polite smile by a woman with a silk blouse and perfect posture, as if culture were a character flaw. Helen had said nothing. She had smiled back, packed up her sample board, and walked out of the Shin Couture building on Gangnam-dero with her head perfectly straight and her jaw so tight it ached. She had taken the subway north, transferred twice, walked 6 minutes in drizzle that was becoming something angrier, and arrived at the stretch of road outside her building on a night when the Han River district smelled like wet concrete and unspoken things. That was when the sky opened. Not a drizzle anymore. Full monsoon. The kind of Seoul summer rain that feels deliberate, like the city itself has something to say. The street was empty in an instant. Umbrellas went up, heads went down, everyone fled for awnings and doorways and the underground passages that honeycombed beneath the city. Helen stood in it. She tilted her head back and let it hit her face, and for 1 full minute she just stood there, getting soaked, and when that was not enough she reached in her bag and put in her earbuds and hit play. The song that came on was Burna Boy. She had not chosen it deliberately. It was just where the shuffle landed. But the bass hit and something in her chest cracked open the way it always cracked open when Afrobeats found her in a foreign city. And before she understood what she was doing, she was moving. Not performance. Not workout. Just movement. The kind her body does when your mind has run out of language and your feelings are too large for any room you have ever been in. She moved in the rain on that empty Seoul street with her eyes half closed and her arms wide, and her Ankara-wrapped dress plastered to her skin, and she did not care about a single thing in the world. She did not notice the motorcade. 3 black vehicles, 2 identical SUVs flanking one longer car in the center, had turned onto her street from the main road, rerouted away from a police blockade on the bridge. They moved slowly, the way expensive things move when they are not in a hurry, because nothing has ever made them hurry. The streetlights caught the rain on their hoods like scattered diamonds. In the back seat of the center car, Jae-won Shin was not looking at his phone, which was unusual. He was looking out the window, which was also unusual. He was, in fact, doing something he had not done in approximately 11 years, which was nothing. No calls, no documents, no decisions about money or territories or men who had disappointed him. His chief of staff, Park Sung-jin, sat across from him in silence the way all of Jae-won's people sat, carefully, with the posture of someone who had learned that stillness was not just a courtesy, but a form of self-preservation. Jae-won was 31 years old. He had been running Shin Holdings, the legitimate face, since he was 26. He had been running the network beneath it, the one that did not appear in any filing or corporate registry, since he was 23 when his father died and left him everything, including the debts that could not be discussed at the funeral. In 8 years, he had tripled the empire, eliminated 3 rival organizations, and negotiated a peace arrangement with the Eastern syndicates that had held for 4 years. He was called many things depending on who was speaking and how much they feared him. In the boardroom, Chairman Shin. On the street, a word that translated loosely as the ghost. By the men who reported to him directly, just sir. He had not danced in 11 years. He had not laughed in something close to that. He had, for most of the last decade, operated at a frequency slightly outside the human range, precise, effective, and cold in the way that things become cold when they have been under pressure long enough. Then his motorcade turned onto a dark, rain-soaked street in Mapogu, and there was a woman in a wet dress dancing alone in the road. He said nothing. His finger did not move to lower the window, but he watched. She was completely, utterly unaware of him. That was the first thing that struck him. Not her movement, not the rain, but the absolute quality of her aloneness. She was not performing for anyone. There was no audience she was adjusting for, no self-consciousness in any joint of her body. She moved the way people move when they believe they're the only person left on earth, and that is not frightening to them, but freeing. He watched her for 4 full minutes. "Sir." Sung Jin's voice was careful. "The route is clear." Jae-won did not respond immediately. "Then go around." "Sung Jin bolin get around." "Circle the block." "A beat." "Yes, sir." The motorcade turned. By the time they came back around, the rain had intensified and Helen had moved to the pavement beside the road, still dancing, eyes still closed, completely drenched. The music in her ears had shifted, something slower now, something that moved in her hips instead of her feet. Jae-won's door opened. Sung Jin's head snapped toward him. "Sir." But he was already out of the car. He stood on the pavement 5 meters from her, in the rain, in his black coat that cost more than her monthly rent, and he watched her. His 2 nearest bodyguards materialized from the lead vehicle, flanking at distance, hands loose at their sides. Sung Jin stood at the car door with an expression he would later describe to no one as pure disbelief. She felt it before she saw it, the sense of being observed. She opened her eyes. He was just standing there, in the rain, in a coat, watching her. She pulled out one earbud. "Are you going to stare?" she said in English, because her Korean was still conversational at best, and she did not have the vocabulary for this particular situation. "Or are you going to dance?" He said nothing. He looked at her with eyes that were dark and completely unreadable. She met them straight on, because Helen Osei had never in her life dropped her gaze first. Then, and she would replay this moment for weeks afterward, one corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, the suggestion of one, the ghost of the memory of what his face looked like when it smiled. He stepped forward. He did not know how to dance. That was immediately evident. Whatever he had been in a previous life, whatever ease he may once have had in his body, 8 years of running an underworld empire had given him the stiffness of someone who had learned to occupy space without ever relaxing into it. He moved like a man who had forgotten that bodies could do anything other than sit in chairs and give orders. But he tried. And something about that, the absolute seriousness with which this clearly very controlled, very expensive, very serious man was standing in the rain, attempting to move to a song he could not hear, made Helen Osei laugh. Not politely, not the restrained laugh she used in the office. Her real laugh, the one her mother called the earthquake. He stopped. She put the second earbud in and reached up and put one of them in his ear instead. The song playing was something slow. Davido, she would remember later, the song that felt like being held. She saw the moment it registered in him. Not just sound, but the particular frequency of it, the warmth that Afrobeats carries in its bones, the way it reaches into your chest and asks a question your body answers before your mind does. He started moving again, differently this time. They did not speak. The rain came down in curtains. The street was empty in every direction except for the 3 motionless black vehicles and the 4 motionless men in dark clothing who stood at a distance with the rigid attention of people who understood that what they were witnessing was not their business. 20 minutes later, Helen pulled the earbud out of his ear. She looked at him, really looked. He was soaked through. His coat was dark with water. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His face, stripped of whatever professional configuration he kept it in, looked like a man surfacing from a very long time underwater. "I'm Helen," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved across his face that she could not name. "Go home," he said. "It's late." He turned back toward the car. "That's not a name," she called after him. He stopped walking but did not turn around. One pause, 2 seconds long. "Same time next rain," he said. Then he was in the car, and the motorcade was moving, and the street was empty again, and Helen was standing in the downpour with rain in her eyelashes, and one wet earbud, and the entirely unreasonable feeling that something had just begun. She told herself it was nothing. A strange moment in a foreign city. Seoul was full of strange moments. She had learned this early. The city had its own grammar of surprise, a sentence structure she was still learning to parse. You could be ignored on the subway for 11 months and then have a stranger press a packet of tissues into your hand because she could see you'd been crying. You could be overlooked in every professional meeting and then find a handwritten note on your desk from a junior colleague saying your fabric choices were beautiful. Seoul gave and withheld on its own schedule, and she had long since stopped trying to predict it. She had been here 11 months, and every day produced something she could not explain to anyone back home. The precise choreography of subway etiquette, the way entire families dressed identically on weekends, the restaurants that had no signs because their reputation was old enough to need none. A man in a bulletproof car stopping to dance with her in the rain was just another entry in that list. She told herself this for 3 days. On the 4th day, it rained again. She told herself she was not going outside for any reason related to the events of Tuesday. She was going outside because she needed ramen from the convenience store on the corner, and also because the studio apartment was suffocating, and also because she was an adult woman in a modern city and could do whatever she liked. She was outside for 11 minutes before she heard a car slow behind her. She did not turn around. Your dancing is worse when you know someone is watching. His Korean was precise, measured, each word placed like stone. She turned. Same coat, same car in the distance, though this time there was only one SUV, smaller footprint, or maybe he had decided 4 bodyguard was excessive for a Tuesday night in Mapogu. He stood on the pavement 2 meters away with his hands in his pockets and an expression that was doing a lot of work to appear casual and not quite succeeding. "How do you know where I live?" she asked. "I don't," he said. "Then how?" "The rain." She stared at him. "You drove around until you found a woman dancing in the rain." "I drove in this direction," he said, which was not a denial of anything she had said. She should have asked more questions. She should have, at minimum, been more suspicious. But he had come back, in the rain, to find her. And Helen Osei, who had spent 11 months in a city that was beautiful and cold and largely indifferent to her existence, felt something she had not felt in a long time, which was wanted. "I still don't know your name," she said. "Jae-won," he said. "Just Jae-won. For now." She studied him. "You're a strange man, Jae-won." "Yes," he agreed, as if this were a fact he had been informed of and had decided not to dispute. That was the second meeting. It lasted 45 minutes. They walked because the rain was lighter that night and could be walked in rather than stood in, and he asked her questions in that methodical way of his like he was building a file. "Where in Nigeria? What kind of fashion? How long in Seoul? What did she think of the city?" She answered all of it and turned every question back on him and got almost nothing. He deflected with the practiced ease of someone who had been answering without answering for a very long time. But she noticed things. The way people stepped out of his path on the street, a subtle widening of pedestrian lanes whenever he appeared, as if the pavement itself was extending him courtesy. The way a man outside a restaurant clocked him and went very still. The quality of attention his bodyguard, always at a distance, always there, paid to every person who came within 30 meters of them. She filed it away, called him Storm to herself because he only appeared when it rained, and because something about him felt like weather, imminent and powerful and impossible to predict. If you were reading this and you think you would have asked more questions, you were not Helen Osei, and you were not in Seoul, and you had not just been called aggressively ethnic by a woman in a silk blouse, and you did not know what it felt like to have someone look at you. Not through you, not past you, not with the calculation of someone deciding how useful you were, but at you, with the full attention of a person who has decided you are the most interesting thing in any room you have ever been in together. She went back every time it rained. She told herself each time that this one would be the last. She was a practical woman. She was building a career. She did not have time for a mysterious Korean man who appeared in monsoons and refused to answer basic biographical questions. And then it would rain, and she would find herself outside, and he would be there, and they would walk or stand or occasionally just be in the same space saying nothing, and she would feel for those stretches of time like the city was not so large after all. This went on for 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, she learned the following things about him. He spoke 4 languages. He had not left South Korea in 2 years. He did not drink. He had been to Lagos once, briefly, for reasons he did not specify. He preferred silence to small talk, but was not actually bad at conversation. He simply rationed it, as if words were a resource he had learned to manage carefully. He knew nothing about fashion and asked her to explain it to him with the genuine curiosity of someone who had simply never needed to understand it before. She taught him about color theory while standing under the awning of a pojangmaka with the rain coming down around them. She explained why a woman's silhouette in the right dress could change the temperature in a room. He listened with the full intensity of a man who had long ago learned that most information was useful eventually. "What do you design?" he asked once. "Things that are too loud for Korea, apparently," she said. His jaw moved. "Who told you that?" "My creative director." "Her name?" "Jae-won." He looked at her. "You're doing the face," she said. "What face?" "The one where you're deciding whether to do something about it." A pause. "I don't have a face." "You absolutely have a face." She turned to look at him fully. "Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. I can fight my own professional battles." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your designs aren't too loud. This city is too quiet." She stared at him. He looked away, as if he had said something embarrassing rather than the most unexpectedly perfect sentence she had heard in 11 months. She made a decision that night that she would not examine too carefully, which was that she was falling for this man, and she was going to allow it to happen because life was short and Seoul was cold, and she had not felt warm inside in a very long time. She did not know who he was. She did not know that in the 3 weeks she had been meeting him in the rain, 3 rival syndicate members had been relocated, 1 city official had resigned unexpectedly, and a design firm that had been quietly moving into Shin Holdings territory had suffered a regulatory audit so thorough that their CEO had taken a 2-week leave of absence. She did not know that Park Sung-jin, Jae-won's chief of staff, had compiled a full profile on her within 48 hours of the first meeting. Her scholarship details, her employer, her apartment lease, her visa status, her family in Lagos, and had presented it to his employer with the careful neutrality of a man who had learned not to have opinions about things until he was asked for them. She did not know that Jae-won had read that profile twice and done nothing with it except fold it and put in a desk drawer in an office she had never seen. She did not know any of this. She knew only that when it rained in Seoul, she felt something she had not felt since she was a child in Lagos, running barefoot in the first storm of the season, because her grandmother said rain was a blessing and you received blessings with your whole body or not at all. She knew that storm came back every time, and she thought, on the night of their 4th meeting, watching him attempt to mimic a shoulder move she was demonstrating while the rain turned the street to a mirror of orange streetlights, that whatever this was, she was not ready for it to stop. Stop here for a moment, because what happens next changes everything, and you need to understand exactly how unprepared she was for it. How unprepared anyone would have been, because Jae-won Shin had spent 8 years building a version of himself that was completely airtight. The chairman, the ghost, the man who left no evidence and no witnesses and no loose ends. Helen was the first loose end he had chosen to keep. And loose ends, in his world, had consequences. If you want to know how it all unravels, stay right here. Because we were just getting started. The 5th week, something shifted. It started with a phone call she was not supposed to witness. They were standing at the edge of a bridge in Uido. Still raining, always raining. Seoul in July was a city in love with water. And his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, and something in his face went very still. The particular stillness she was learning to read as the moment the man she knew stood aside and let someone else in. He excused himself, 3 steps away, his back to her, and spoke quietly in Korean too fast and too technical for her to follow. She caught numbers, a district name, the word for north, the word she did not know but would later look up, which meant eliminate. She told herself she had misheard. He came back, slid the phone into his pocket. looked at her with the calm, controlled attention he always gave her. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Business," he said. "What kind of business?" "The kind that's handled," he said, and something in the flatness of it closed the door on the question so completely that she felt the click of it. She let it go. She should not have let it go, but she let it go because the rain was beautiful and his shoulder was close to hers, and she was not ready to open doors that might not close again. This is the part where you lean in. Because 3 days after that bridge, Helen walked into the Immigration Services building in Seoul to deal with a visa extension, a bureaucratic errand that required a specific form she had collected from the wrong office, requiring a second trip. On a Thursday afternoon, when she was already running late and mildly irritated at everything, and she turned to take a number from a queue machine, and there was a board on the wall. A court board, government style. Notices and public safety bulletins, and missing persons, and, in the center, a row of photographs. The kind of photographs that appear in connection with organized crime task forces. Korean text she could read enough of to understand the heading. Known associates. Persons of interest. Ongoing investigation. She scanned it without real attention. Then she stopped. The photograph was 4 years old. His hair was shorter, and his expression was the professional mask she had never seen him wear, because he was always, with her, some version of the man beneath it. But the jaw, the eyes, the precise, particular quality of stillness that his face had in repose. She stood in front of that board for a very long time. The name beside the photograph was Shin Jae-won. The text beneath, it said several things she had to translate slowly in her head. CEO of Shin Holdings. Under investigation by the National Police Agency's Organized Crime Division. Suspected head of the Shin Network, a criminal organization believed to control significant portions of the illegal trade in 3 metropolitan districts, with connections to political lobbying, money laundering, and the disappearance of at least 2 individuals whose cases remained open. Suspected, the board said. Suspected. Helen read the Korean word 3 times to make sure she had it right. She thought of the phone call on the bridge, the word she had not recognized, the way men widened the pavement for him, the 3 black vehicles, the bodyguard who was always there and whose eyes were always moving. She took a very careful breath, and then, because she was Helen Osei and she had not come to Seoul to be passive about anything, she took a photo of the board. She went home. She sat on the floor of her studio apartment with her back against the bed and her phone in her hands, and she did not cry. She did not panic. She thought, with the terrible clarity of someone who has just had a very large piece of information land on a puzzle they thought they understood. She thought, he already knew everything about me, before I knew anything about him. She thought, this is why he never answered any real questions. She thought, the word I heard on the bridge. She thought, for one long, cold moment, I am in a city far from home, and I have been meeting alone in the dark with the most dangerous man in South Korea, and I thought it was romantic. Her phone lit up. A message. No name. He had never given her contact name. Only a number she had saved as Storm. It said, "It is raining on Saturday. I will be at the usual place." She stared at it. She typed and deleted 4 different responses. Then she put her phone face down on the floor and went to make tea, because some decisions could not be made in the same minute as the information that required them. She had until Saturday to decide whether to show up. But here's what she did not know yet. What none of us know in the moments when everything is about to change is that the choice had already been made for her. Because the board at the immigration office was not the only place her name and his had come to appear in the same sentence. Across the city, in a building in Gangnam that had no signage and no public record of ownership, a man named Choi Byum-suk was looking at a photograph of Helen Osei. He was not Jae-won's friend, and he had very specific plans for the girl who danced in the rain. If you think you know where this is going, you don't. Not yet. Stay with us. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This story is just getting dark. Drop a comment below. Would you have gone back on Saturday? She thought about this on the subway home. Seoul moved around her. The late-night riders, the couples leaning on each other, the solitary men with their phones, and the women who read physical books, because something about that felt like resistance. She thought about a man who climbed out of a bulletproof car to dance with a stranger in the rain and asked for nothing in return. She thought about the way he had said, "Same time next rain," not a question, not a request, but a statement of intent, as if something had been decided between them that neither had agreed to aloud. She got off at her station and walked the 6 minutes to her building and did not allow herself to look back down the street even once. She was asleep by 2. She dreamed about rain. In the morning, she woke and made coffee and stood at her narrow window, looking at the city, and thought, with the particular clarity that mornings bring after the emotional turbulence of nights. I'm a 24-year-old Nigerian woman on a fashion internship scholarship in Seoul. I do not have the bandwidth for mystery men and monsoons. I have a creative director who thinks my work is too loud and a rent review in 3 weeks, and exactly one friend who will answer the phone at any hour. And that friend is an Itaewon, and her name is Yuki, and she's going to have a great deal to say about this. She told Yuki over bibimbap on the Saturday. Yuki was the Kenyan friend, full name Yuki Kamau, which was its own bilingual story involving a Japanese grandfather and a Kikuyu grandmother that Yuki could tell in 4 different tones depending on her mood. She listened to the entire rain story with the expression of someone who had known Helen long enough to have both high hopes and serious concerns for her. Bulletproof car, Yuki said. Yes. 3 cars total. 2 SUVs and the main car. And bodyguards. 4 of them. That I could see. Yuki looked at her bowl. Helen, I know. This man is either a diplomat, a celebrity, or something significantly more complicated. I know. And you danced with him in the rain. I invited him to dance with me in the rain, Helen said, because accuracy mattered. There is a distinction. Yuki looked at her with the expression of someone recalibrating their assessment. How was it? Helen thought about it. 20 minutes. The rain. The way he had moved. He's terrible at dancing, she said. He was completely serious about it, like he was doing a report. Yuki burst out laughing. But he tried, Helen said. He genuinely tried. That's the thing, isn't it? Yuki said. A man who has no reason to trying. They sat with that for a moment. Be careful, Yuki said. I know. I mean it. Not like a warning. Like, know what you're walking toward. Helen nodded. She did not tell Yuki that she was not sure anyone ever knew what they were walking toward. She just paid for the bibimbap and went home and looked out her window at a city full of rain that hadn't fallen yet. She never did look back, but she noticed 3 days later when she was walking to the subway in the early morning that there was a different energy to the street, a particular kind of quiet that had not been there before. A man reading a newspaper who was in the exact same position at 7:15 as he had been at 7. A car parked where no car had been parked before. She cataloged these details with the part of her brain that noticed things, filed them without naming them, and kept walking. She would understand later. Not yet. She went on Saturday. She told herself it was because she needed answers. That was not entirely a lie. She did need answers, and the only person who had them was the man she was walking toward in the rain outside the Pojangmak on the corner of the street where they had started walking together 3 weeks ago, which already felt like a different geography of time. She also told herself that she was not afraid. That was more complicated. He was already there when she arrived. Coat, same as always. Hands in his pockets. He watched her come toward him with that full, unguarded attention he only ever gave her. And for one moment, she almost stopped walking because it was so disarming. The way this man, who was apparently terrifying to everyone in the city, looked at her like she was the only uncomplicated thing in his life. She stopped 2 meters from him. Who are you? She asked. Not in Korean. In English, because she needed her full vocabulary for this. He was quiet. Not Storm, she said. Not just Jae-won. Who are you, actually? He looked at her for a long time. The rain came down around them, quieter tonight, a persistent mist rather than a downpour. You saw something, he said. I saw a board at the immigration office with your photograph on it. A pause. What did it say? It said organized crime, she said. It said investigation. It said your name. He nodded. Once. Slowly. The way he nodded when he was processing something rather than agreeing with it. Say something, she said. What would you like me to say? I'd like you to tell me it was wrong. I'd like you to tell me there's an explanation that makes that board make sense in a way that doesn't mean what I think it means. He said nothing. Jae-won, It means what you think it means, he said quietly. The rain was the only sound for a moment. How much of it? She asked. He looked at her. How much of what that board says is true? Enough, he said. She absorbed this. She had expected denial. Or deflection. The elegant verbal sidestep he was so good at. She had not expected this. A man standing in the rain telling her the truth in one word, with his eyes steady and something in his face that looked, if she was reading it correctly, like relief. The phone call, she said, on the bridge. Business. The word you used. It means eliminate. He looked at her with something new. Surprise, she realized. Surprise that she had caught it. Your Korean is better than you let on. My Korean is exactly as good as I let on, she said. I just didn't know that word until I looked it up. Another silence. A delivery truck moved through the intersection at the end of the street. The mist thickened. What was eliminated? She asked. A situation, he said. Not a person. I need you to be more specific than that. A business arrangement that had become a liability. Contracts terminated. People relocated. He held her gaze. Nobody was hurt. She watched his face. She had 11 months of reading Korean faces, the particular expressiveness people deployed when they wanted to seem agreeable, and she knew what that looked like. This was not that. This was someone telling the truth with the uneasy precision of a man who did not do it often and was finding it uncomfortable. Why, she asked. Why what? Why are you telling me the truth? You could have lied. You're very good at controlling what information you give people. I've watched you do it for weeks. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower. Because you're the first person in 8 years who has asked me a direct question without wanting something from the answer. She stared at him. Everyone in my life, he said, asks questions to position themselves. To learn what I want so they can give it to me. To learn what I fear so they can avoid it. To learn what I need so they can leverage it. A pause. You asked because you wanted to know. That's different. You knew who I was before we met, she said. You had someone run my information. Yes. That's a violation. Yes. And you don't have a reason for it. That makes it okay. No, he said. I don't. She looked at him. This man standing in the rain, admitting fault with the same quiet steadiness he gave everything. Not asking her forgiveness. Not performing contrition. Just offering her the unadorned fact of what he had done and letting her decide what to do with it. You're a very strange criminal, she said. Something moved in his face. I've been told I'm strange. I'm serious. I know. She crossed her arms. The mist was becoming something more assertive. So what happens now? I know who you are. What does that mean for me? Nothing, he said. If you walk away right now and never speak to me again, nothing happens to you. You have my word. Your word, she said. My word, he said. And the way he said it, flat and absolute. The way he said everything that was not negotiable, made her understand that in his world this was not a small thing. That his word was a currency that held its value precisely because he did not spend it freely. She studied him. The rain. The empty street. The distant figure of his bodyguard, present and unobtrusive as always. What if I don't walk away? She asked. He was very still. I'm not saying I won't, she said quickly. I'm asking what it means. Practically. It means, he said slowly, that you know something, and people who know things about me are either protected or they are a problem. He paused. I would like you to be protected. You'd like, she said. Yes. Not demand. Not arrange. Like. I told you, he said. You're the first person who asks questions just to know things. I'm not going to start lying to you now. The rain came down. Helen Osei made a decision that she would spend the next several months second-guessing and, ultimately, never regretting. I want 3 things, she said. He waited. 1. No more profiles. No more information gathered about me without my knowledge. Done. 2. If anything you do puts me in danger, directly or indirectly, you tell me. Immediately. No managing it quietly while I walk around not knowing. He hesitated on this one. Just a fraction. Then agreed. 3. She uncrossed her arms. You tell me your last name. He blinked. It was, she would later reflect, the most unguarded expression she had ever gotten out of him. You saw my last name on the board. I want to hear you say it. A pause so small it was almost not a pause. Shin. Jae-won Shin. Shin Jae-won, she said, Korean order, the way it should go. Testing the weight of it. He looked at her like she had done something he had not anticipated. She put her earbud in and held the other one out toward him. He took it. They danced in the rain and did not talk about any of it again that night. The next 2 weeks were the best and most confusing weeks of Helen Osei's life in Seoul, because knowing did not stop any of it. Knowing who he was did not change the way his attention felt, did not make the conversations less electric, did not reduce the particular sensation of being in his orbit, which was warm in spite of everything, warm the way the center of a storm is still and warm while the edges are tearing the world apart. What had changed was the texture, the sharpness. She saw things now with a new lens of knowing, and everything was more vivid and more complicated, and she was always slightly afraid. She went to his office. Not invited. She did not have a number for his professional line, and she would not have used it even if she did. She went because Shin Holdings occupied 3 floors of a building on Gangnam-dero, and she passed it every morning on her way to work. And on a Wednesday, she was running 20 minutes early and made a decision in the space of 3 steps to push through the glass doors. The lobby was marble and enormous and staffed by 2 women at a reception desk who assessed Helen's ankle-length encore wrap dress and natural hair with the particular careful neutrality of people trained to be welcoming to everyone without expressing an actual opinion about anyone. She gave Jae-won's name. The receptionist smiled. Do you have an appointment? No. Mr. Shin's schedule is... Tell him Helen is here. The receptionist looked at her screen, made a call she spoke in very quietly. Listened. A pause that lasted exactly 4 seconds. 32nd floor, the receptionist said, and her voice had changed in a way that told Helen everything she needed to know about how that phone call had gone. The 32nd floor was nothing like she expected. She had braced herself for the aesthetic of organized crime as filtered through 11 months of Korean dramas. All dark wood and whiskey and tension. Instead, it was bright and almost clinical. Glass walls, clean lines, the kind of architecture that said we have nothing to hide so aggressively that it circled back around as suspicious. He was behind his desk when she came in. Jacket on, tie, the full professional configuration she had never seen on him. He looked different. Not less himself, but a different layer of himself. The top layer, the one the world got. His assistant hovered in the doorway. Leave us, he said, and the assistant was gone so quickly the door barely moved. She stood across the desk from him. He looked at her with the expression of a man who was trying to decide whether to be alarmed or pleased and landing somewhere in between. You came to my office, he said. I did. What? I wanted to see you here. In context. She looked around. The desk, the view, the city spread out below in precise grid lines. This is where you're a CEO. Yes. And what's on the floors above this one? A beat. Corporate functions. Legal. Finance. And the floors below. This building also houses 3 other companies. She sat down in the chair across from him, uninvited. You're very good at answering questions with information. He almost smiled. It's a skill. Is there a floor in this building, she said carefully, that I should not ask about? He held her gaze. Yes. Will you tell me about it someday? Possibly. She leaned back, studied him, the desk between them, the bright, clean office, the city behind him. You look uncomfortable. You came to my office uninvited. Does it bother you? He considered this. No, he said, and she believed him. It surprises me. Nobody does that. Nobody asks you real questions either, apparently. Also true. He paused. Are you in trouble? Is this a problem I can solve? Something tightened in her chest. No, I told you, I fight my own battles. You can fight your own battles and still let someone help. Is that something you do? Let people help you. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said honestly. Then we're the same, she said. He looked at her across the expanse of the desk. This woman who had walked uninvited into his professional life and sat down across from him with the ease of someone who did not recognize territory, who lived as if everywhere was equally hers to occupy. He thought of the immigration board. He thought of the question she had asked in the rain. What if I don't walk away? You should go, he said, not unkindly. If you're here too long, people will notice. and people noticing you complicates things I would rather keep uncomplicated. For my sake or yours? Both, he said. Mostly yours. She stood, straightened her dress, looked at him one more time. It's going to rain Thursday. I know. I'll be outside. I know that too, he said. She left. In the elevator going down, she pressed her back against the wall and breathed. Because what she had seen in his office, the quality of stillness around him, the way his assistant had moved, the particular look on the faces of the 3 people she had passed in the corridor who had clocked her heading toward his office and very deliberately not looked, had told her something she had been allowing herself not to fully absorb. This was not a man under investigation. This was a man who was the investigation. The whole investigation. The mountain that all the other things were on. And she was going back Thursday. The question she kept turning over was not whether she was making a mistake. She knew she was making a mistake. She was sharp enough and honest enough with herself to know it clearly. The question was whether the mistake was the kind you survived or the kind that survived you. She did not have an answer yet. Thursday came. They walked farther than usual, all the way to the Han River path, where the rain turned the water to hammered silver and the city lights went soft and diffuse in the mist. He brought an umbrella, which she refused, and he held it over both of them anyway without asking. And she let him because it was easier than arguing in the rain. I looked you up, she said. Not just the board. I did research. I assumed you would. The things they say you've done. Some are true, he said. Some are exaggerated. Some are misattributed. Which category is the politician from Incheon? He glanced at her. You were thorough. Which category? Misattributed, he said. That one was not me. But you know who it was. I know many things I don't act on. She walked beside him, watching the river. Do you think you're a good person? He was quiet for a long moment. No. Do you want to be? Longer pause. I did once. I'm not sure the question is still useful. Why not? Because wanting to be good and being able to be good are different things, he said. And I am too far into the choices I've made to pretend there's a version of this where I'm something other than what I am. She thought about that. My grandmother used to say that the measure of a person wasn't what they'd done, but what they did next. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. She also used to say that some men were like fire, beautiful and warm and capable of burning everything down. And the only question was what you used them for. He stopped walking. She stopped too and looked up at him. The umbrella made a private space in the rain. Which one am I? He asked. I haven't decided yet, she said. He looked at her for a long time. Then, I want to show you something. She followed him. What he showed her was not the empire. It was a room in the basement of a nondescript building in Mapo. Not the kind of basement you were imagining, not dark or threatening, but a large, clean-lit space that turned out to be a professional kitchen operating a meal service for elderly residents in the district. Staff moving efficiently, containers being packed and labeled, a coordinator at a whiteboard updating a delivery schedule. This runs every day, he said. 312 households. She stared at it. You run this. It's listed under a foundation, he said. Not under my name. Why? Because foundations with my name on them attract the wrong kind of attention. The point is for the service to run, not for the association to exist. She turned to look at him. This man who had told her he was not a good person and then brought her to a kitchen feeding 312 elderly people on a Thursday night. You're not what I thought you were, she said. I'm exactly what I said I was, he answered. The kitchen doesn't cancel anything else out. I'm not showing it to you, so you'll think better of me. Then why? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. Because you asked if I wanted to be good, and I wanted you to see that I still remember what it looks like, even if I'm not it. She stood beside him in the doorway of that kitchen and felt something shift in her chest. Not towards simple feeling, but towards something more complicated than that. The kind of feeling that comes with understanding a person more fully, which is always a harder thing to carry than misunderstanding them. She was so deep in it by now that she could not have named a moment when it started. She was falling for a ghost who knew how to feed people in the dark and who only ever appeared when it rained, and who had told her the truth when lying would have been so much easier. This was the last peaceful night, because the following morning, Helen arrived at work to find her key card wasn't working. The woman at the Shin Couture reception desk A different woman, younger, who had not been there long enough to have opinions, told her that her internship had been reviewed and that her visa-linked position had been flagged for an administrative reassessment. Administrative reassessment. Helen stood in the lobby of a building owned by Shin Holdings and understood several things simultaneously. 1. Someone had reached into her professional life. 2. The only person with the power to do that in this city was the man she had been standing next to in the rain last night. 3. This meant something she was not going to like. She called him. Not the number she had saved as Storm. The other number. The one she had gotten from the receptionist on the 32nd floor. He picked up on the second ring, which told her he had been expecting her call. "Did you do this?" she said. Silence. Jae-won, the creative director who called your work aggressive, he said carefully. She was reassigned this morning. She was what? What? Because she was wrong and it affected your position. I told you not to. I know what you told me. I told you I fight my own battles. You fight yours, he said, and his voice was very quiet. This was mine. How was this yours? Because she insulted something I care about, he said, and that makes it mine. She stood in the lobby of that building with her useless key card and the full complicated weight of what he had just said landing on her all at once. Something I care about. Said plainly. Offered without performance or preamble. She should have been angry. She was angry. She was also something else. You cannot do things to my life without asking me, she said. You're right. I shouldn't have. Jae-won. I said you're right. The acknowledgement arrived so quickly and so cleanly that it stopped her mid-sentence. She had been prepared for deflection. With justification. Not for this. Come to the 32nd floor, he said. I'll fix your access. The situation below has been corrected. I don't want it fixed by you interfering. I want it fixed properly. I understand. A pause. Come up anyway. She went up anyway. She walked into his office, and he was standing at the window with his back to her, and when he turned around, his face had an expression on it she had not seen before. Something that was not the careful blankness and not the warmth she occasionally glimpsed, and was not the authority he wore like a second coat. It was something that looked at its edges like fear. There is a complication, he said. She felt something cold move through her. What kind of complication? Someone is watching you, he said. Not me. Someone who wants leverage over me. The cold deepened. How long? We noticed activity 3 days ago. 3 days ago, she said. And you're telling me now? I was trying to resolve it without alarming you. You said you would tell me immediately. I know. You promised. I know, he said again, and this time there was something raw in it. Not desperation, something more controlled than that, but reaching toward the same place. I broke the agreement. I was trying to protect you, and I did it wrong, and I'm telling you now, because it is beyond the point where I can manage it without telling you. She stared at him. The city spread behind him in the window, ordinary and gleaming in the morning light. Who? She asked. A man named Choi. He runs an organization that has been trying to establish presence in my district for 6 months. He's been looking for pressure points. He stopped. Started again. You are a pressure point. She let that land. He knows about us, she said. Yes. What do you need to do about it? He looked at her. I need to move you. Move me where? Somewhere safe. One of my properties. A driver. Security. He said it all in a flat, efficient sequence, the way he probably briefed his lieutenants on operational arrangements. I'm not moving into your property, she said. Helen, I'm not doing that. This man is not. I know he's dangerous, she said. I understand the situation, but I will not be arranged into somewhere safe and managed like a loose end. I'm a person. He was quiet. His jaw moved. Tell me what he looks like, she said. Tell me what I need to know to be careful. Give me the information and trust me to use it. That's not sufficient protection. Then give me a contact, someone I can call. But I stay in my apartment, and I go to work, and I live my life. Do you understand? He looked at her for a long time. She could see it. The thing he was fighting, the absolute control freak in him that wanted to sweep her into a secure location and post 8 men on her door and know exactly where she was at every moment. She could see him fighting it. One person, he said finally. Someone you'll never see unless you need them. Always within 30 seconds of you. 30 seconds. Non négociable. She considered. Fine. And you tell me everything from this point. Everything. Not when it's too late to manage it, everything. Yes. Say it like a promise. He held her gaze. I promise. She believed him. She should not have believed him that easily. She knew that even as she believed him. But there was something about the way this man made promises, the scarcity of them, the way he only offered them when he meant them, that made them feel like architecture, like something you could stand on. She went back to her desk. Her key card worked. Her access had been restored. The creative director who had called her work aggressively ethnic was, as of that morning, working on a different floor in a different capacity, and there was a new creative lead who had already sent Helen an email requesting a portfolio review. She sat at her desk and looked at her screen and thought about the 312 elderly residents getting meals in Mapogu. She thought about a man who stood in the rain because she danced. She thought about a board in the immigration office. She thought, I am in this. I am fully, irreversibly in this. And she thought, I am not leaving. But she did not know, could not have known, that 2 floors below her desk, at that exact moment, a man she had never met was opening his phone and sending a message that read, "The girl stays in the building after hours on Thursdays. We move on Friday." The countdown had started. If you made it this far, you're exactly who this story was made for. Hit that like button right now and let us know in the comments. Do you think Helen should have run? Because what comes next, you're not ready for. She made herself tea and sat at her desk. She opened her sketchbook, the physical one, the one she kept for the designs that were too personal to risk on a work computer. She drew the dress she had been thinking about all week, the one that had come to her in pieces over the last several meetings in the rain, something that moved like water and held its shape like architecture. She drew it in the ankle-length silhouette that Korean fashion kept trying to talk her out of. She drew it in the deep indigo she had been told was too strong. She drew it with the hand-printed detail at the hem that the creative director had once called decorative noise. She drew it, and it was beautiful, and it was hers, and she was not making it smaller for anyone. The tea went cold. She kept drawing. This was what she had come to Seoul for. Not a man, not a mystery, not a monsoon romance with someone who was wanted by the National Police Agency. She had come for this. For the chance to bring what she knew and what she was into conversation with a city that did things with fabric and structure and the geometry of a body in motion that she had not seen anywhere else in the world. She was going to make something extraordinary here. In spite of the creative director, in spite of the looks on the subway, in spite of everything that had tried to make her feel like a guest in a house that didn't want her. She put the sketchbook down. She picked up her phone. She did not message Storm. She sent a voice note to her mother in Lagos, the first one in 3 weeks, and said, "I'm okay. Seoul is cold and the rain is beautiful, and I am working on something. I'll call properly on Sunday." Her mother's reply came in 40 seconds. A voice note that was 80% relief and 20% mild scolding, the exact proportion Helen had expected, and she listened to it twice because it sounded like home. She went to sleep. Saturday arrived with the particular quality of Saturdays in monsoon season, gray, warm, and purposeful. She took the decision about the rain meeting as it came, which was to say she did not take in advance. She put on jeans and her favorite wrap top and her water-resistant sandals and went to the market to buy vegetables, and if she happened to walk past the usual street on her way home, that was incidental. It was raining by 7 in the evening. She was outside by 5 past. He was waiting. Of course he was waiting. They did not address the conversation about Choi that night, not directly. It was there between them the way important things are before the right moment arrives, present and acknowledged without being named. They walked instead, through the city that was both of theirs and neither of theirs, through the streets that never fully slept, past the Pojangmaka with its orange lights spilling onto the wet pavement, past the convenience stores and the shuttered boutiques, and the park where 3 elderly men played jangi under a shelter, unhurried as stones. She told him about the dress she had drawn. He asked her to describe it. She described it. Indigo, moving like water, holding like architecture. The hem detail that was not noise, but language, the kind of visual vocabulary she had grown up with, that her grandmother had worn to market and her mother had worn to church, and that meant something specific in the taxonomy of who her family was and where they came from. He listened with the full, cataloging attention he gave everything. When she finished, he said, "What stops you from making it?" "Resources," she said. "Access. A position where my decisions about fabric and construction are considered valid. And if those weren't obstacles, then I'd have already made it." He nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was storing information rather than responding to it. She did not ask what he was storing it for. She was learning him well enough to know that some things he did quietly and the results appeared later, and the connection was not always visible until the thing was already done. She thought about that as they walked, about the nature of a man who moved quietly and let the results speak, about the kitchen in Mapo-gu, about 312 dinners. The rain came down. Seoul accepted it, the way it always did, not with resistance, but with the pragmatic flexibility of a city that had long ago made peace with water. Umbrellas emerged from bags and pockets. People adjusted their pace. The city rearranged itself around the weather and kept moving. Helen walked in it uncovered, as she always did, and he held the umbrella over both of them, as he always did, and she let him, as she always did. Some arguments weren't worth having. Friday started like any other day. That was the particular cruelty of it, the total absence of warning. No electricity in the air, no instinct firing in Helen's chest as she rode the elevator down from the Shin Couture offices at 7:45 in the evening with her portfolio bag over one shoulder and her phone in her hand. The city outside was doing its August thing, warm and humid. No rain tonight. The streets thick with the weekday end-of-work migration. She was thinking about a dress silhouette she'd been sketching during her lunch break. She was thinking about whether the Pojangmaka near the river would still be open at this hour. She was not thinking about Choi Byum-suk. The lobby was emptying fast. The security desk was staffed by one guard, reading something on his phone. She pushed through the revolving doors and stepped onto the pavement, and the city swallowed her up. She made it exactly half a block. The van had no markings. It slowed alongside her with the unhurried patience of something that was certain of what it was doing, and before she could register fully what was happening, the side door opened, and there were two men, and they were very quick and very efficient. She fought. She fought with everything she had, which surprised them. She could tell it surprised them, could tell they had expected a young woman alone in the evening to be easier than this. She got one arm free and screamed in 3 languages and drove her heel into a shin and made it genuinely difficult. It was not enough. She was in the van. The door closed. 30 seconds. Jae-won's person, the one she had never seen, the one who had apparently been 30 seconds from her at all times for the past 5 days, had been close enough to watch it happen and not close enough to stop it. He was on the phone before the van had turned the corner. The call connected on the first ring. "She's taken," he said. The silence on the other end of the line was the most dangerous silence he had ever heard in 4 years working for this man. Then where? In the van. Helen was doing something practical, which was the only thing she knew how to do when fear tried to take her brain hostage. She was memorizing. Turns. Timing. The sound of the road under the tires, changing from smooth to rougher, which meant they had moved off a main road. The smell. Industrial, near water. Possibly south of the river. The behavior of the 2 men holding her arms. Professional, not sadistic, which meant they were muscle for hire and not personally invested, which meant they were following instructions from someone, which meant she had value to whoever sent them. She had value. She held on to that. Value meant alive. Value meant someone wanted her functional. She was right. The van stopped. The door opened into a loading dock that was cold and smelled of chemicals and fluorescent lit, with the flat white light of a place that had not been designed for human comfort, but had been adapted for human occupation. Chairs. A table. A man standing with his back to her, looking at his phone. He turned around when they brought her in. Choi Byum-suk was younger than she had expected. Early 40s. Neat, unhurried, with the expensive understatedness of someone who had been wealthy long enough to no longer feel the need to display it. He looked at her with the appraising attention of someone accustomed to evaluating assets. "Ms. Osei," he said in excellent English. "I apologize for the method. I prefer introductions to be voluntary." "Then you should have called," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of it for being steady. He smiled. It did not reach anything. "Sit down, please." She sat, because she was calculating, and sitting gave her more time than refusing and being forced to sit. "You're close to Shin Jae-won," he said. "We've met," she said. "More than met." He set his phone on the table, face up, screen displaying what looked like a surveillance photograph. She and Jae-won on the bridge in Uedo. She felt her stomach drop and kept her face absolutely still. "You've been following me for a while," she said. "Watching," he said. "There's a distinction." "There really isn't." He sat across from her. "Ms. Osei, I'm not going to hurt you. I want to be very clear about that. You're not the point of this. You are the message." "What message?" "That Chairman Shin has a vulnerability." He folded his hands on the table. "Men like him operate on the assumption that they are without weakness, that everything in their life is hardened, protected, anticipated. You represent something he did not anticipate, something he has not hardened." A pause. "That's interesting to people like me. People who want leverage," she said. "People who want respect," he said, "which is sometimes the same thing." She looked at him. She was thinking very quickly about the promise Jae-won had made to tell her everything. About the 5 days since that promise, during which he had had eyes on her at all times and had clearly known that Choi was watching and had not told her how close it was. She was angry about that. She would be angry about that later. Right now, she needed to be useful to herself. "What does the message look like?" she asked. "We call him," Choi said simply. "He comes. We have a conversation about territory and arrangement and the redistribution of certain interests. And then you go home. Just like that. Just like that." She studied him. "You really think he'll negotiate?" "I think he'll come," Choi said. "Whether he negotiates depends on him." A pause. "But he'll come. For you, he'll come." She did not let herself feel anything about that sentence. "Not yet." "You're very confident about that for someone who's never managed to get a meeting with him through ordinary channels," she said. Choi smiled again, still nothing behind it, but something more attentive now. "You're sharper than I expected." "Most people say that," she said. "It's a problem with their expectations." He almost laughed. "Shin is a lucky man." "Call him," she said. "Let's get this done." He was already reaching for his phone. The call went through a relay that Jae-won's people had tracked in 4 seconds. He was already moving before it connected. In the back of the car, accelerating south through a city that was turning into a blur outside the windows, he held the phone to his ear with the absolute stillness of someone who had learned long ago that panic was a luxury and control was the only currency that mattered. Choi's voice was smooth and professional. He outlined his terms with the precision of someone who had rehearsed them. 3 districts, 2 shipping routes, a percentage on the customs arrangement they both knew existed. In exchange, a standing agreement. Peace. "And the girl walks out tonight," Jae-won said. "Of course," Choi said. "She's a guest. Let me speak to her." A pause. Shuffling. Then her voice. "I'm Fina." Her voice was steady, and he felt something in his chest that had no name in his operational vocabulary. Something that cracked slightly at the edges when he heard how steady she was being. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Jae-won. I'm coming." "Don't do anything." "I'm coming," he said again. "Don't do anything that makes this worse," she said, and her voice shifted, urgent, direct. "Do you hear me? I'm fine, and I want to stay fine. Whatever you're thinking right now, think smaller. Do you understand?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. He heard her exhale. Choi came back on the line. 40 minutes, he said. "Come alone, or with a reasonable number." 20, Jae-won said. "And I want her in the car before we talk." A pause. "That changes the dynamic. Those are my terms." Another pause. "Then fine." The call ended. Sung Jin, in the front seat, did not turn around. "Sir, alone means—" "2 cars, Jae-won said. "Standard. And if Choi has more than standard?" Jae-won looked out the window at the city passing. "He won't. He wants a deal, not a war. He's smart enough to know the difference. Smart men miscalculate." "I know," said Jae-won. "So do I. Keep moving." He was there in 18 minutes. The loading dock was exactly as Helen had described it to herself. Cold, industrial, the kind of space that meant business without ceremony. Choi had brought 8 men. Jae-won had brought 4, which under the rules of these meetings was a show of confidence rather than recklessness. The two parties stood at careful geometry, everyone doing the calculation that everyone always did at these moments. Helen was standing against the far wall. She watched him come in. She had been watching the door since the call ended, with the focus of someone who had decided to not be afraid and was holding to that decision with both hands. He walked in, and their eyes met across the space, and the thing that passed between them in that look was not romantic. It was older than that, more fundamental. The look of a person confirming that another person is still themselves, still whole. He looked at Choi. Send her out. Choi gestured. One of his men moved toward Helen. She walked past him before he reached her. She walked across the floor with her portfolio bag still on her shoulder because they had not taken it, and she walked straight to Jae-won and stopped 2 feet in front of him. I told you to think smaller, she said quietly. For men is small, he said. I'm serious. I know. He looked at her with the full attention she had learned to read, checking her face, her posture, the way she was holding herself. Confirming. Go to the car. Jae-won. Please, he said. It was the please that moved her. She had never heard him say please. In 4 weeks of rain and conversations and a dance in the dark and a kitchen feeding 300 families, she had never once heard him say it. It arrived so plainly and so completely without performance that it sat in her chest like a stone. She went to the car. What happened in the next 40 minutes in that loading dock, she learned only in pieces, later. The negotiation, which was tense and precise, and moved in the particular language of men who operated at the edge of what law could reach. The arrangement that was eventually reached. Not what Choi had asked for, not what Jae-won wanted to give, something in between that both parties could use and neither would acknowledge. The moment at the end when Choi said something she was not present for, and Jae-won said something she was not present for, and the geometry of the room shifted, and everyone understood it was done. He came out of the building and got into the car beside her, and the motorcade moved. He did not speak for 4 full blocks. She waited. I'm sorry, he said. She turned to look at him. He was looking straight ahead, jaw set, hands very still in his lap. For which part? She asked. For not telling you how close it was. I said I would tell you everything, and I managed the information instead of sharing it. You were right to be angry. I was angry, she said. I know. I'm still angry. I know that too. She looked at him, the profile of his face, the particular quality of stillness he had when he was holding something he was not going to show. You were scared, she said. He said nothing. Not in there, she said. Before. When Sung-jin called. You were scared. A muscle in his jaw. I don't. Jae-won. He exhaled. Slowly. Yes, he said. She let that sit for a moment. What are you going to do about Choi? She asked. The arrangement holds. For now. For now. These things rarely hold indefinitely. He paused. But it gives you time. Time for what? He turned to look at her then. His face was doing the thing it did when he had decided to say something true and was making himself do it. Time to decide whether this is worth it to you. All of it. The risk of being near me. She looked back at him. Because I cannot, he said quietly, keep you at arm's length. I have tried. I'm not able to do it. And that means you are in the radius. And the radius is dangerous. He held her gaze. I'm telling you this clearly so that whatever you decide it knowing. She thought about a woman dancing alone in the rain. She thought about a man who climbed out of a bulletproof car for something he couldn't explain. She thought about Afrobeats and color theory and a kitchen in Mapo Gu and 312 dinners and the word please said for the first time. My grandmother said fire was useful, she said. He was very still. She said it all depended on what you needed it for. She held his gaze. I think I know what I need you for. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the same careful precision, he gave everything that mattered to him. What is that? To be real, she said, in a city that has been trying to make me into a different shape since the day I arrived. You are the only person here who has never once asked me to be smaller. Something moved across his face. Something she had not seen before and did not have a word for and did not need one. The car moved through Seoul in the late-night quiet. The river was dark on one side, the city lit on the other. Somewhere far above, invisible clouds were building, She could feel it, the pressure in the air, the particular weight of an incoming storm. "It's going to rain," she said. "Yes," he said. "Tomorrow. Tonight, I think." She nodded, looked out the window. "Tell me about Lagos," he said. She turned back. "Your grandmother," he said. "What was she like?" And Helen Osei, who had not talked about her grandmother in the 11 months since she arrived in a city that did not have space for her history, began to talk. In the back of a bulletproof car, in the rainy season of Seoul, with a man who ran an empire in the dark and fed people quietly in the light, she talked about her grandmother's compound and the smell of rain on hot concrete, and the way West African storms came in like a decision rather than a weather event. He listened with his full attention. He asked questions. The city moved outside, and neither of them looked at it. This was the closest to ordinary they would get for a long time, because it was 3 in the morning when her phone rang. Not her personal phone, the one Jae-won had given her 3 days ago that she had not told anyone about, and whose number only he had. She looked at the screen. It was not Jae-won calling. Sung Jin's name. And when she answered, his voice was careful and compact in the way it was when things had moved past the stage of management and into the stage of emergency. "Ms. Osei, is Mr. Shin with you?" "No. He dropped me at home 2 hours ago. He has not arrived at his residence." She sat up in the dark. "What do you mean he hasn't?" "His vehicle stopped tracking 40 minutes ago. We have a location, but..." A pause. "We need to know if he contacted you after he left you." "No." "Sung-Vin, what happened?" A pause that lasted exactly long enough to be significant. "Ms. Osei," he said, "the arrangement made tonight. We believe Choi did not consider it final." The cold came back. All of it at once. "Where is the location?" she asked. "Ms. Osei, it would not be appropriate for you to..." "Where?" Her voice was the voice she used in boardrooms when she had decided something. "Tell me where." He told her. She was out the door in 4 minutes. The city was wet by the time she reached the street. The rain Jae-won had predicted, arriving now in earnest, warm and heavy, the kind that turns Seoul into a version of itself that feels both lonelier and more alive. She moved through it with her head down and her heart loud in her chest. She told herself she was not afraid. This was getting harder to maintain. The location was a rooftop in Uedo. She had been here before. This building, this river view, the same bridge she could see from the Han River path where they had walked and where she had heard the word. She looked up later. The city spread in every direction, glittering through the rain. She was not supposed to be here. She understood that. She was a civilian in someone else's war, and every training manual ever written said stay out, stay low, stay safe. She went anyway. The roof access was not locked. This told her something that she filed and did not examine. She pushed through the door. There were 5 people on that rooftop. 3 of Choi's men, 1 of Jae-won's, and Jae-won himself. He was standing at the edge of the railing with his back to the city and his hands visible at his sides, which she understood instinctively was deliberate. Open hands, nothing hidden. The negotiating position of a man who was calculating everything even now. Choi's men had guns. Jae-won's did not. She understood the arithmetic, and it was the worst arithmetic she had ever looked at. Nobody had noticed her yet. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of rain on hot concrete. She thought of the first night on this street, dancing in a black coat, stepping out of a bulletproof car. She thought, I came all the way to Seoul. I am not watching this happen. She walked onto the roof. Jae-won saw her first. The thing that crossed his face was not what she expected. Not anger, not alarm, though both were there in the edges. What crossed his face was the look of a man who has just seen something arrive that he did not plan for, and that changes everything. Choi's men turned. Who is this? One of them said in Korean. My name is Helen Osei, she said in Korean, loud and steady, and walked into the center of the space. Helen. Jae-won's voice was very quiet, warning and something else tangled together. She kept walking, until she was standing between him and Choi's men, which was not safe, which was possibly the least safe thing she had ever done in her life. Her heart was doing something extraordinary. You want leverage, she said to the man in the center, younger, harder-eyed than Choi himself, clearly the one in charge of this operation. You had it once tonight, and you gave it back. You're not going to get it again. Step aside, the man said. I'm not going to do that. This doesn't involve. I am standing in the rain on a rooftop with a gun pointed in my direction. It involves me. She turned slightly, enough to be speaking to the city as much as the men, enough to include Jae-won in her peripheral vision. Whatever Choi told you tonight ended in an agreement that holds. That is not my interpretation. That is the law of how these things work. You know that. He knows that. Everybody on this roof knows that. Silence. Breaking an agreement made tonight, she said, is not leverage. It's a declaration. And declarations have consequences. Even for Choi. She looked directly at the man with the gun. Does he know you're here? A fraction of pause. Infinitesimal. She saw it. He doesn't, she said. This is yours. This is personal or ambitious or both, and Choi didn't sanction it. The man's jaw tightened. She had been right. She had hoped she was right. She had approximately the confidence in her rightness that you have when you are standing between someone you love and a gun and cannot afford to be wrong. Walk away, she said quietly. The arrangement holds. Choi gets what he negotiated. You go home. Nobody escalates anything tonight. Another silence. Longer. She counted her own heartbeats. Then the man in the center lowered his weapon. Slowly, by degrees. The way decisions come undone. Not all at once, but in the moment when the center of thing gives and the edges follow. The three men moved toward the roof door. Past her. Past Jae-won. Without looking at either of them. The door opened and closed. She stood in the rain on the empty rooftop and did not move. His footsteps behind her. Close. He started. I know, she said. You could have been. I know. She turned around. He was close. Closer than they had stood since the first night, and he looked at her like he was trying to memorize something. The particular way she held herself in the rain, the way she had just walked onto a rooftop with a gun pointed in her direction and talked a man down with nothing but accuracy and nerve. How did you know he hadn't sanctioned it? He asked. Because Choi is smart, and that wasn't smart. And because that man paused when I asked. One pause. One pause is a lot, she said. You taught me that. Something in his face. She looked at him, rain-soaked as she was, standing on a rooftop above the Han River in the middle of the night in the city that had been trying to make her smaller since the day she arrived. She thought of the board at the immigration office. She thought of the kitchen in Mapo-gu. She thought of every rain they had stood in together. I'm not leaving Seoul, she said. I know, he said, and I'm not walking away from this. I know. Then you need to decide something. She held his gaze. Because I can't be in this halfway. Either I'm in your life, really in it, not kept at careful arm's length while you manage what I know and don't know, or I'm not. Those are the choices. He looked at her for a long time. Then he reached into the pocket of his coat. What came out was not what she expected. Not a weapon. Not a document. Not anything operational. It was small and came in a cloth fold, and when he held out, she looked at it for a moment before she understood what she was looking at. It was a ring. His mother's, she would learn later. The one his father had given her, that she had returned to him when he turned 25 and told him to find someone to deserve it. He had carried it in the pocket of every coat he owned for 6 years and had been, until this moment, unable to articulate to himself why. I don't know how to be the kind of man your grandmother's reign was meant for, he said. His voice was the quietest she had ever heard it. I know what I've done, and I know what I am, and I know the radius is real, and there are going to be more rooftops and more nights we are too brave for your own good, and I'm going to spend every one of them terrified. He paused. But I am more myself standing in the rain with you than I have been anywhere in 11 years. And I am not. I cannot, he stopped. Start again, more careful. I'm asking you to stay. Not in the apartment I can arrange. Not with the security I can post. In my life. Knowing what that means. He set the ring on the railing between them. Did not push it toward her. Did not ask her to take it. Set it down and left it there. An offering rather than a demand. Because he was underneath the empire and the ghost and all of it. A man who had promised her that he would stop managing things and start giving her the truth. The rain fell around them. The city hummed below. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She picked up the ring. She held it in her palm without putting it on, because she was Helen Osei and she had never done anything she wasn't fully ready for. And she looked at this man, her storm, her ghost, the fire she had been warned about and had chosen anyway. My grandmother, she said, also used to say that the only thing worse than loving something dangerous was letting fear make the decision for you. He held her gaze. I'm not ready to answer tonight, she said. He nodded. But I'm not giving this back. She closed her hand around it. The rain came down. Seoul did not stop for any of it. Below them, the Han River ran dark and constant, and the city lights bent in the water, and somewhere far away a song played from an open window, something with a bass line that moved in your hips before your mind knew it was there, something warm and certain and undeniable. She did not put the ring back down. Neither of them moved for a long time. This is not the end. This is the part where everything that has been building finally has weight, where you understand that the rain was never just weather, that the dancing was never just dancing, that a man in a black coat stepping out of a bulletproof car to join a woman on an empty street was the first move in something neither of them had a map for. What happens next? He still has enemies. The arrangement with Choi is 48 hours old, and already the edges of it are showing. His mother, who does not know Helen exists, is about to find out. There's a police case file with Jae-won's photograph on page 1 that has a new investigator as of last week, one who has been asking questions about a young Nigerian woman seen repeatedly near Shin Holdings. And Helen's visa expires in 22 days. 22 days. The ring is still in her hand. The rain is still falling. The decision is not made yet. And somewhere in the city, Choi Byum-suk has just received a phone call from the man he didn't sanction, and he is not pleased. And when Choi is not pleased, the city rearranges itself to accommodate his displeasure. You want to know what she decides. You want to know about the mother and the investigator and the 22 days. You want to know if the rain ever stops. Stay right here. This story is not done with you. If this story hit different, like this video, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment. Team Helen or Team Walk Away? The second installment is coming, and the rooftop was just the beginning. Later, after the rooftop, after the rain, after the car ride, and the ring in her palm, Helen would try to remember the exact moment the city stopped feeling like a place she was visiting and started feeling like a place she was in. She could not find it. It was not a single moment. It was accumulated. The way seasons change, not in an instant, but in the slow, irreversible accumulation of temperature and light until you look up and everything is different and you cannot name the exact day it shifted. Seoul had changed her, not into something smaller, into something more. She had come here with a vision of herself that was already large, already clear, a designer, a daughter, a young woman from Lagos with her grandmother's color sense and her mother's jaw and the particular gift of moving through spaces without apologizing for the room she took up. She had brought all of that, and the city had tried, in its subtle and not always gentle way, to compress it. It had not succeeded. She stood in the rain on a rooftop above the Han River with a ring in her closed hand and looked at a man who was a ghost and a criminal in a kitchen feeding 300 families and someone who said please in the rain like it cost him something and meant it precisely because it did. She thought of all the ways this was complicated. She thought of the visa with 22 days on it. She thought of the investigator with his new file. She thought, I have never in my entire life done anything that was only simple. The ring was warm in her hand. The rain kept falling. The city moved below them, indifferent and infinite, doing the things cities do, which is to continue regardless of the stories being told in their buildings and on their rooftops and in the back seats of their cars, regardless of the women dancing alone at midnight and the men who stop to watch and the things that begin in rain and end, or do not end, in rain. Seoul in July. The monsoon season. The year everything became something else. She did not put the ring on. Not yet. But she did not put it down. And Jae-won Shin, who had been the ghost for 11 years and had not been afraid in almost as long, watched her hold it and felt something in his chest that he recognized distantly from a time before the empire and the choices and the weight of all of it, something that felt like beginning. The rain fell. The story was not done.